Chapter 26. After leaving Chris, I wandered around the village for an hour, buying vegetables and fruit. Strolling around with my packages, window shopping and dreaming of what I want but more of what I need. Daydreaming about buying a pair of expensive shoes to wear to Anna Charles's party consumed my thoughts. I don't know how long I stood looking into that shop when a soft, strong voice said, "Do you like those shoes?" I turned, and there stood a man in his late 30s. A wisp of gray hair had invaded his dark, curly, wavy locks. Surprised and offended, I turned around. He stood 6 feet with a pair of worn, expensive jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled past his wrist, where a large, expensive watch adorned his taut hands and arms. My eyes fell to his fingers and the manicure that signaled he was not a construction worker. However, I was looking for a wedding band. There was none. No rings, only that watch that cost 2 years of rent. "Why do you want to know?" I said in a not too pleasant voice. "I've been watching you from my car," he said with a smile that allowed his dimples to deepen in his face. I looked at his neat, unshaven face and expressive gray eyes. "I assure you I'm not a stalker." I said, "Do you have references to prove that?" He smiled. "Not on me. I'm new here, my name is Andrew Blake." He held out his hand. I shook it. "I'm Tyler," I said to him. "That's a pretty name." He held my hand a second longer than I expected, giving me time to glance into his seductive gray eyes. "It's more of a boy's name, I think." I took my hand back and I took my senses back. I hadn't felt a sense of sexual arousal since I had last seen Brandon. It had been a month, and with the thought of Angela, my desire for Brandon began to wane. How else could I explain what was happening to me now? "You have lots of packages. I can take you home." He pointed to a dark blue car with dark windows. "What kind of car is that?" "I've never seen one like it. Or maybe I've never paid attention before," I thought. "It's a Maybach Landaulet." He smiled, knowing full well I didn't know what it was or how outrageous the price could be. "Thank you, but I prefer to walk." I stood unsure of myself and turned around with nervous energy to aim myself in the right direction. Andrew with his good looks made me nervous, and I had to get away from him as soon as possible. "Here's my card. It has my telephone number, and if you need a reference, I can send you one or you can give me one. I need your phone number or work number, or I can meet you for breakfast next Saturday so we can get acquainted," he said. He was persuasive. I thought for a minute, staring into his seductive, matured face. "Next Saturday at 9, the one across the street," I said, pointing. "A deal." And he held out his hand and I shook it once more. So much was happening to me at once. I met Brandon and he was my first love. I met Jordan and he hired me for a wonderful job, and now I've met a man who isn't married and things are looking up. I walked away from Andrew, and when I reached the end of the block, I looked back and smiled. He stood leaning against his car watching me. After I flashed him a seductive smile, he entered his fancy car with a ticket on the windshield and drove away. I turned the corner and headed for my apartment with some treats for my cat. I figured the cat deserved something for doing a great job of getting rid of the mice in my 2-room flat, not counting the bathroom, which only had a shower, sink, and toilet. I walked up the stairs to the 2nd floor and prayed that the tenant over me had gone out for the day. He never took off his boots, and the sound they made on the bare floor drove me insane. Moving was not an option, and neither was going back to Jersey. Chris's boyfriend Patrick had settled in, and he wouldn't risk leaving that wonderful place to end up back in this noisy, cold water flat. As I put the key in the door, I mumble, "Thank God it's summer." "It's always summer when you're around, Princess." Brandon startled me. I turned in the direction of his voice, angry and happy to see him standing on the dirty stairs and unsafe banister. How did you find me? I went to Chris's loft and ran into her boyfriend coming out of the shower and asked him about you. He gladly gave me an address and a key just to get me out of there. Brandon's eyes glanced around and said, "Aren't you going to invite me in? We should celebrate your independence." I didn't want him to see the ratty furniture that came with the apartment. Reluctantly, I opened the door wide and nodded. When he entered into the apartment, the resident cat who came with the flat greeted us with his usual, distrustful eyes. I left Brandon standing in the middle of the floor, wondering where to sit. Sit anywhere. When I returned, he had made himself comfortable in my bed. I glanced at him. It was the only safe place to sit. "You can't stay here," he said, glancing around. I knew I couldn't, but I wanted to know his reason. "Why not?" I said as I opened a can of cat food and placed it in a bowl on the floor. "It's not safe, it's unhealthy," he said, looking up at the sound of someone walking. "And it's noisy. How can I make love to you in a place like this?" "You can't." I took his hand and headed him to the door. We stood at the door. Then, before I could protest, he took me in his arms. "There's no one here to separate us." And he placed his tongue into my mouth, and I didn't protest. We kissed long. I pulled away. "I can't do this." He placed his hand under my cotton top with the thin straps and cradled one breast in his hand. I watched him bring his head down and his lips curl around my nipple. He stood sucking my nipple and with me breathing loud. My back braced on the door, his body moved into mine, and I thrust my hips into him. "Do you feel me?" he asked with shallow breathing. "I can't do this," I said, with my arms wrapped around his neck and his head buried into my chest. I ran my hands through his hair and he sucked each nipple until it was sore. He found the other breast and he ran his tongue over my nipple and I screamed, "Brandon! Brandon, make love to me now." At that moment, my buzzer rang and I jumped and pushed him away. "Don't answer it," he said to me. "I need you now," he said. "I'm expecting papers from the bank." I turned and pulled my top down and straightened my hair, and then I opened the door. "Miss," the man said, "I have a delivery of red roses." "I wasn't expecting roses but a package," I said. "I don't know about that. All I was asked to do is deliver these roses." And he shoved them in my face. "Who sent them?" Brandon stepped forward and asked. "Mr. Blake came into the shop downstairs and ordered these flowers to be sent to Tyler." "Are you Tyler?" "Of course not," Brandon said. "But I am," I said, looking at Brandon. "Then these are for you," and he handed me the box. I closed the door without giving him a tip. I had only enough money to pay the rent and catch the subway in the morning. That, and a box of expensive roses. I wonder if I could stand outside and sell them. It was a nice thought, and if I wasn't ashamed of standing on the corner, I probably would have done that. After I paid the rent for the month, I had to keep something for transportation and food for me and my nameless cat. I was making a great salary for an intern, but it wasn't going to get me out of here. Brandon looked over my shoulder as I read the card aloud. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Andrew." Why did he stop there? Maybe he didn't want you to know what his true intentions are. And Brandon finished the line of Shakespeare's sonnet, "Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May." Brandon threw my box of roses on the floor and pulled me into his arms as we locked eyes and lips. He began by unzipping my jeans, and his hands eased to my bud. The heat from the kiss caused my legs to weaken, but he spoke, and the spell was released. "How do you come to know Andrew Blake?" "I don't think that's any of your business. I'm in love with you and you love me. And one day, you're going to be my wife. It's my business. And I want you out of this place. You can't make any demands on me, I said. Tell me why I can't, he said, moving even closer to my body. His eyes softened and he reached for my hands. I didn't respond. I pulled away and he felt my coldness. Don't see Andrew Blake again. Is there something I should know? I raised an eyebrow. His expression never changed. He wasn't worried for my safety. His eyes wandered about the room. My white cat with the black circle around one eye caught sight of him. The cat stood peering at him, as if guarding me and challenging him. There's nothing to reveal about Andrew except that I'm jealous, and I don't want to lose you again. He looked me in the eyes, his eyes deepened with sadness. Give me time, he pleaded with me. The cat left our side and scooted under the bed and disappeared. I don't have a lifetime to wait to see what Angela will do next, I said to him, gathering my thoughts and hands to my side. I looked, and my phone was buzzing on the small table in a basket near my door. I have to get this. I turned my back to him. He reached for the doorknob and turned. Are you going to my sister's graduation party? I didn't answer. I was reading a text. It was from Andrew Blake. I answered absent-minded, tell your sister I'll be there. And he closed the door, leaving before I could say another word. The text read, Please have dinner with me tonight. I'm not taking no for an answer. Did you like the roses? Andrew. They are beautiful. That settles that. I'll pick you up at 9. What am I doing? I don't know this man. He could be a stalker or worse yet, a man I could like. After all, he's gorgeous, with his dark curly hair and gray eyes. I sat in my kitchenette staring into a window across the way, waiting for my package from FedEx, and thinking about Jordan. I inquired at the bank, and was told that he was out of the country, and wouldn't be back soon. Finally, the bank papers came. Working in the loan department was interesting. I got a chance to see private information on some of the more private individuals. When I opened the package that was delivered, a name stood out. Andrew Blake. He was a developer of high-rise buildings, and he was finalizing a loan for a building that Brandon wanted to purchase, and Jordan promised to finance the loan. This had to be a coincidence. I had to find out. My plan of calling Andrew and giving him an excuse for tonight went south. Now, I had to go on a date with him. I needed to know how he got my cell number, and how did he know Brandon, because Brandon clearly knew him or about him. Maybe it wasn't so unusual, because they were the 1%. A small group who traveled in the same circles and had the same taste in women? Curious. Chapter 27. The hot night air hung suspended overhead like a woman lying on top of her lover. Sweat poured from my body. It was too hot to stay in my small apartment. I had to get out of there, and it was a welcome sight when Andrew knocked at my door. He wore an engaging small smile. Although it was 90 in Manhattan, he appeared cool with his off-white linen shirt and pants. In one hand he had a basket of flowers. The flowers were of assorted colors, some were red, purple and white, and a few English roses. I didn't know flowers well, but I knew one thing: I liked the gesture. He read my expression. I have a tab with the florist. Do you like? He held up the basket and then placed it in the foyer. I didn't want him to go any further. I had my purse in my hand and ready to get out of that oven before he discovered my secrets. If he lingered too long, he would discover the mice and the fiercely protective cat. I like very much. What was I to say? I felt embarrassed, at all the attention I had garnered from the men who now exploded into my less than exciting life. So many men, and so little time to do anything. Where are we going? My apartment. I glanced up at him with lifted eyebrows. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, stopping at the elevator in the old building. It did have an elevator, and it was clean most times. How else could the owners justify the $1,000 I paid each month for rent? Then, let's take a walk around the village and get to know each other. I know this cozy restaurant that's tucked away on Bleecker Street, Andrew said. Okay, let's go. I would have agreed to anything just to get out of that sweatbox. One more minute of persuasive conversation, and he would have me in his apartment. When we reached the street level, I noticed his fancy car parked. How do you get a parking spot? I'm just lucky, I guess, he said with a satisfied smile. His eyes bright, showing a mind that was thinking. It took more than luck in Manhattan. It took connections with the police and the mayor. I folded my arms as we walked, looking into shops and bars. Would you like a drink? Maybe an iced tea. What's a pretty bird like you doing drinking something as tame as tea? It was at that point that I caught his accent. Are you English? Why, yes. I thought I had lost that accent. I've been here forever. And he opened the door to the tavern and placed his hands behind my back and led me into the bar. The bar small and intimate, its tables sat only 2 people. Good thing it wasn't full, or it would be uncomfortable. 2 older couples in their 50s were enjoying a drink. The waiter sat us facing the street. I could look out and see cars passing and people walking. Andrew looked at the waiter and said, "Bring us your best red wine." When the waiter returned in less than a minute, he had 2 glasses, and he uncorked it and let it breath. Then Andrew smelled it and took a sip and shook his head, "Yes." The waiter poured as I watched Andrew. Tell me something about yourself, Tyler. Why don't you go first? I said, feeling a bit tense and not knowing what I should tell. Well, I was born in London and my father was a diplomat. My mother was my father's secretary, who made arrangements for social functions. He looked at me. Are you good at social functions? I'd like to think I am, but I haven't been asked to one. Yes, you have. Aren't you invited to a graduation party? My eyes opened wide. How did you know that? I read it in the papers. Oh, that, I said, sitting back in my chair. What else did it say? I was hoping he didn't read the gossip columns. Too late. That you were the $1 million girl, he said with a smile. I'm curious, how did you garner that title? Well, you must have missed the headlines. It's the talk of the town, I said, owning the title. Someone bid $1 million to dance with me. And that someone Brandon Charles. No one but him would make headlines with something as outrageous as that, and being married too. I think Andrew wanted me to know, if I didn't already, that Brandon was married. You appear to know Brandon well, I said. I should. We attended the same schools in England. Our parents traveled in the same circles. And now they were still in the same circle, this time with me. Or was it a triangle? I wondered. Triangles are a lot different than circles. With circles there are no beginnings and no endings. Without realizing it, I was on my 2nd glass of wine. So many wrong decisions have been made when drinks are involved. I was determined not to fall into that trap. I think I should be going. I stood and he stood with me. He pulled a black credit card out and handed it to the nearest waiter as he followed me to the door. Wait. I looked back. Did I say something that was distasteful to you? No. I'm feeling drunk. You haven't eaten. He received his credit card as we were exiting. He held the door open for me, and I walked through. I walked straight into Spencer. "Hi Tyler, long time no see." Andrew stood nearby and waited until Spencer released me from the hug. I wasn't big on hugs, and Spencer knew it. He released me quickly. "You look great." He looked Andrew up and down, and then he made a mistake. Or I thought it was a mistake. But who knows with Spencer? "Does Brandon know you're out on a date?" "Brandon isn't my father. My father doesn't decide who I date. Why should he know anything?" I asked, shifting my eyes around, trying to give Spencer the cue to get lost. Andrew was trying to be a gentleman as he watched and took it all in. "Excuse me, but I think you have overstepped your bounds with Tyler," he said, looking at Spencer. "And who are you?" Spencer demanded. "I'm the man she's dating, and you should tell your boss that he needs to take care of his wife first and stop interfering in Tyler's life." At that moment I felt great. "That serves you right, Spencer," I thought. Spencer apologized and shook Andrew's hand like the gentleman I knew him to be. Andrew glanced at me. "Since I'm now your official date, let me fix you a meal." Because I had one too many drinks, considering I'm not a drinker and one is too many, and it was too hot in my apartment, I accepted. We strolled around the corner near my apartment, where Andrew's car waited with another ticket in the windshield. He took the ticket, folded it, and placed it in his slacks. Then he opened the door for me, and I got in. The leather seat swallowed me when I leaned back. I thought I was in a luxurious hotel suite, sitting in one of the chairs. Classical music drowned my sorrows and yearning for Brandon. The sound system and open roof was to die for. I settled back and enjoyed the ride, which was way too short. Before I could think about what I was doing, we were entering a garage underground. It was well lit, and the cars unbelievable. "Whose cars are these?" Andrew turned to me with an unapologetic glance and said, "They're mine. Come." He stepped from the driver's side, and I waited for him to open the door. We walked a few feet with Andrew holding my hand, and we entered the elevator, and it zoomed up to the penthouse. I looked around, strutting out of the elevator, too stunned to get my footing. A casual smile broke along the lines of his mouth. He appeared to be pleased at seeing the amazement in my eyes. "I love the look on your face." "Is it that telling?" "No, but it's real. There is no pretense in you," he said, taking my hand and leading me into his home. I walked to see the panoramic view. Glass circled the entire apartment. "Can't people see in here?" "You are priceless," he said, moving to the small fridge, reaching in and pulling out a bottle of wine and glasses on the shelf, then opening the bottle of wine and pouring some for me and him. After filling my glass, he walked in the direction of the smell of seafood. When he returned, he said, "I hope you like lobster. I flew in Maine lobster for you." Why would he say for me? What did he know? He knew about the disaster at the fundraiser at the Museum of Natural History. What else did he know? I didn't want to spoil another Saturday by asking too many questions, but I had some. But now, frankly, I didn't care. I gave him one of my prettiest smiles, considering I didn't smile much, but after Chris hammered me about the importance of smiling even if it was fake, I found that I could, and so I did, but I wasn't comfortable, not at all. "I like anything with lobster in it," I said, smiling. "My chef prepared a meal for us." "I thought you were going to cook." "Heavens no. I don't know where the pots are or what they look like. It would be a disaster, and since I want this evening to be perfect because you are perfect," I interrupted him. "Perfect? You must have me confused with someone else." "You are perfect for me," he said, meeting my glance. "You have this perfect little mouth." And his thumb eased around the rim of my mouth. And that perfect oval face with those high cheekbones. He reached for my hands and I stood. He walked around me as if choosing a Monet painting and said, "That body is just perfect. Not too small and not too," he smiled. "You are like a little girl, impressionable." He didn't continue. He sat on the cream-colored sectional sofa facing the sky overlooking Central Park, with me watching him, stunned.